focusing on the weather piece of this, and then Lena, of course, our grid girl, focusing on the energy piece of this.
Yeah, I'm actually going to say this time around, 2 Lenas is not what you want to see, because that means we're really focused on the grid and that there's obviously an issue here. So we all got the conservation alert earlier this afternoon. So basically, it's something I've been anticipating for nearly a week now. On Monday, I said, no way we end the week without a conservation notice. And sure enough, we get it. So right now, basically what it means is supply and demand are close, too close for us to just kind of skirt by, right? So there's close enough that they're saying, hey, if you can conserve between the hours of 3 and 8, that would really help us out. And I know the reaction of Texans is like, I'm not helping out. If you can't do your job, I'm not going to switch up my life to make it easier for you. But what I like to say in that is, if we end up with outages, let's go back to winter of 2021, right? A lot of people were without power for days on end. And so we want to keep our neighbors from going through that again. And you also have to think, if people are without power, that could be you. That could be your house in this heat. And then of course, that's dangerous too. Part of the reason that it's happening is because of not just the weather here in Houston, but in like the major metropolitan areas of the city or the state as well. So look, this is the 6-day forecast. The first kind of like hump, the camel hump that you see, that's blue. Thursday. Yeah. So all of that blue is demand, everything that we're using. So you'll notice, like, you know, at midnight, it's a lower number because we're sleeping, we're not using as much. At the height of the day is when you start to see the mountains go up there. That purple line is the supply line. So that's not only everything that can be made, everything that can be moved around throughout Texas. Like when the sun is shining, yeah, that's a lot of power, a lot of solar power, but you have to be able to harness that, and you have to be able to move it throughout the state. And so that has a limit. That's finite. So the numbers are too close. You don't like to see those lines close together. So on the right-hand side of the screen, that green rainbow, the reserve rainbow, 5,500 right now. 5,000 is a number that I'm comfortable with, where I say, hey, don't worry about it until you start seeing it go down. So at 8 o'clock this evening, the number right now is projected to be 2,400. Just as a kind of reference point here, 2,300, so just 100 less megawatt power, puts us into an emergency situation where it's no longer, hey, do you mind conserving? It's then we move into conservation needed. This is when we get into the emergency part of the situation, where if we don't start doing something, people could be without power.
Does that mean rolling blackouts, or, like, you know, for people watching at home, what does that mean for them?
So it's not a rolling blackout yet. So there are different levels to this, right? So it's voluntary conservation. Hey, it would be great if everybody can conserve. So if we get to conservation needed, that's when we still have a chance to help each other out, right? Okay, you know what? I wasn't going to kick up my air, but now I'm going to, because it's needed. So that's the first level. Then the second level would be, it's critical. If you don't do something, we're going to do something. So hey, Texans, if you don't reduce your demand, we're going to reduce it for you. That's when we get into level 3, where they just drop you off the grid. They force down demand by saying, you can't have it anymore. We're not going to give it to you. And they do that to protect the grid, because for ERCOT, for all its like ebb and flow, good and bad, their main concern in that control room is to keep the grid alive. The fact that you get power at home, that's a nice offshoot, but keeping the grid alive is their main concern. So if that means I have to drop you off of it to keep the grid alive, then that's what I'm going to do from the eyes of ERCOT.
Which is what happened in the big freeze, right? Was we got dangerously close to that. And
that's one of the things that went wrong. There were several things that went wrong in 2021, but basically, yes, they were protecting the grid, and they were saying, we're dropping a lot of you to protect this grid from dying, because if that grid dies, it needs electricity to start again. But there is no electricity. So how are you going to do it? It's called a black start, and it's never, it may have happened once in U.S. history, but it's definitely a situation we don't want to be in. But the thing is, the numbers fluctuate throughout the day, right? Maybe everybody decides, all right, I'm going to go ahead and kick up my air. I'll run it at 78, 79 degrees. And then all of a sudden the numbers change, and there's a bigger space between supply and demand, and then things are fine. I think we're going to squeak by.
Okay.
It's just too
uncomfortably close.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I honestly, I've been biting my nails all week. You know, I'm looking at this thing hour by hour like a nerd. You know, my fellow energy nerds, we're all just watching it. And Thursday was the day. Today is the day that we thought, it's a problem. It's just a problem. It just is. It's kind of like forecasting the weather. You look at the numbers, you crunch the data, and you go where the data points you. And the data pointed us to conservation alert. So hopefully it doesn't get any worse than this. But the thing is, I wanted to ask you about the weather going forward, because we had this weather watch that was issued 12 days ago. It's been extended twice. It's the longest one we've had of the summer. And then I'm wondering if you think it'll be extended beyond tomorrow, because it's set to expire tomorrow.
I will say that I think that will likely get extended. So I'm going to use a little bit of an anecdote when it comes to energy and weather, right? We have several levels of warnings in weather. We have advisories, we have watches, and we have warnings, right? So to me, a weather watch is kind of like an advisory, right? It's like that lowest rung when we're talking about alert status, and then it seems like, conservation, this is, not mandatory yet, right? So that I would say is like a watch. Like when we have a severe thunderstorm watch, we know that the potential is there to cause a problem, but we're not quite at that warning threshold yet. And then it sounds like the mandatory conservation that you're saying is where we'll end up if we get into a problem would be more like a warning.
Right, okay.
So I would equate it to that, and I would say given that we have no real changes in the short-term forecast, I can't see why they wouldn't extend it, right? We've got temperatures across the state, 100 plus. You were talking about the major metroplex areas like Dallas, like San Antonio, like Austin, that are actually hotter than us, actually hotter for the temperature. Of course, it feels like value not as high, it's drier heat, but either way, all of Texas is looking 100 plus today, tomorrow into the weekend, because the heat dome is situated on top of us right now. So we don't really have any heat relief, Lena, until early next week, and that's still fairly optimistic. There's been a lot of discrepancy between the models in terms of where does that go? You can see right now winds were light. We were talking about solar power. I'm going to get you a little bit of a better picture of talking about that heat dome and where it's shifting and what that kind of means in terms of changes for us. But essentially, it is set to shift off to the north. And what that is going to do here is this has the AM banner on it, guys. So bear with me here, but it's still going to give you the information that you need. So here's the area of high pressure, right? It's out over the Panhandle. And we're going to watch what happens here as it kind of slides its way off to the east and eventually north. So what this is going to do is pull all that heat up into the Midwest, but you can see we're still in the bottom, right? We're still in the grip, maybe not the strongest part of that, but part of the reason why I've been saying rain next week is optimistic is because it's going to largely depend on the exact size and intensity of that heat dome and precisely where it ends up. And sometimes small changes can make a big difference. So while it is looking like eventually we'll get some rain in the picture towards the tail end. Here's Tuesday, right? Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. It's looking to be mostly our coastal communities. And right now the models have been trending to kind of focus that rain off to the southern portion of the state. So that'll finally dip us below 100, not by much. We're talking about mid 90s. But other large metro areas of the state could still be experiencing that heat and not quite getting in on this rain relief.
Well, that's the thing too. I think if all the metroplex areas are under kind of the same situation, which we are now, right? Triple digit heat. That's when we're like, oh, everyone's cranking up the AC. If you just have parts of the state that are under the heat dome and other parts that are not, then it's possible that it's not really an issue. But, we also have to think about, there are two sides to the grid. There's supply and demand. There's all the power they can generate, feed into the grid, and there's everything that we take from the grid. So on the demand side, we can lower our demand, or they can drop us and lower it for us. Supply is the thing that kind of fluctuates, where they can only make it move so much power. So right now, though, there's, like your car, right? Sometimes your car's running fine, and then your battery goes out, or someone's car goes out, but everybody else's car is fine. So with all the generators, we have what, hundreds and hundreds of generators, and we might even be over 1,000 now generators. So you've seen them. It's like a little block, and then it looks like, oh wow, it looks like a big old battery right there. And they're all throughout the state. So we've got, more than 1,100 of those that feed into the grid. Sometimes they break. It's hot, right? They've been working and turning the power, or maybe, one little thing could go wrong with it, and then it stops producing power, and then it falls off the grid with supply. Right now, we've got 6,600 megawatts that are offline. There's always going to be something offline. What they consider to be typical would be about 5,000. So we're about 30% higher than that. Right. So we're kind of in between what's typical and what's high outage-wise. So let's just say it gets so hot that they're turning out the power and then they start breaking. Then we have a supply problem. So it's just all these things that could happen, but if it's a confluence and they start happening at the same time, people are like, I'm not going to kick up my air. I'm going to use everything. I'm going to run the dishwasher, the washer, the dryer, and also these generators start falling. Then we're running into a real problem. But it's just things that could happen, which is why we say, if you can conserve, go ahead and do it. It doesn't hurt anything and I like to think of it as you're not helping ERCOT, we're helping each other.
Right. No, and that's true. You know, honestly, when I leave the house, if I'm not home, I don't need to air condition the apartment for the ghosts, right? I mean, my plants will be fine. And usually when I come home, you know, the temperature's only risen to, you know, I don't know, 77, 78. And of course, that's mildly uncomfortable for a little while I get the air to come back down. But you can draw the blinds when you're not home. You know, there's things that you can do to make it more comfortable and still contribute, like Lena said, to helping each other. I mean, you know,
we don't want to repeat of 2021. No. And to be fair, I don't think that we're in that situation. I don't think we're anywhere near that situation. And it's just different all the way around. But the one thing, too, we were talking about the heat dome and the wind, because wind and solar have been kicking in gangbusters for the grid, right? I mean, that sun has been shining. The very thing that's making us hot is the very thing that's also feeding the grid.
It's a double-edged sword.
Exactly. So it's like the good, the bad, and the ugly with that one. But we lose solar power once the sun goes down. So sunset, I believe, is
8 o'clock.
Right. And that's when they're expecting, I mean, that's when I crunch the numbers, that's when it looks to be the tightest. And that's because solar drops off. You were showing us the wind. It doesn't look like that's really kicking in for us today. And then you have a couple of the generators, the thermals, traditional natural gas, coal, nuclear, that are maybe offline. Maybe they're being repaired right now. Maybe they broke. Maybe they're just kind of, you know, easing up on their production. So all these things coming together is leading us to this problem where we get the conservation alert. Now, they do have on standby, like, batteries, backup power. It's not a whole lot, but it can make the difference when you're kind of teetering on the edge. Yeah. But the thing is, some of them can take an hour to ramp up. Some of them can only take 10 minutes to ramp up, but they only last a couple hours. So it just depends on how long is it going to be tight? How long is it going to be that we need all of this ancillary power to come into play? And the good thing is, with it happening at 8, like it's a little bit later, kids are in school, so maybe they start going to bed. You know, people start using a little bit less energy because you're like, you know, it's time to go to sleep now. Let's turn off the lights, turn off the TV. So those are the things that bring it down at night. So it is kind of good that it's happening a little bit later in the day rather than getting this notice for, like, you know, midday, noon, or 5:30 when everybody's getting home and starting to cook and starting to do everything. So
well, and at least temperatures are starting to fall at night, right? So if you do have to do with, I know, we're still warm in the overnight hours. What do you think are some differences between when situations like this happen during cold months and hot months? Because like you said, I mean, there are some differences there.
Well, I'm a gearhead, so I'll kind of put it in cars. Okay, so your car battery, everyone thinks, oh man, when it gets cold, my battery dies. Your battery actually gets beat up in the summer with the heat, and then it's the winter that breaks it. So the damage happens in the heat. You're just not noticing it because it's still running. In the winter is when you are like, it's just not going to make it anymore. So I think I think this is a precursor of winter. In 2021, if you go back, and we had that problem in the winter, but the summer of 2021, there were a lot of red flags, but because we skirted by, no one really noticed it, right? Because we didn't get the conservation notices as often. The weather watches were kind of unknown. And so many of us were like, ERCOT, never heard of it, don't care, right? Because it wasn't a problem. Then in 2021, in the winter, we saw all of the flags that happened in the summer come to fruition. We're like, oh, these were the signals. Now it's a problem. So, you know, I've been talking to some people who are much smarter than me, focused only on this. They're saying the same thing, like, you know what, we notice the problems now, and if we don't fix them by winter, we can see some real potential issues here, because there's so many people. Governor Abbott, I think, just tweeted not too long ago about how many people are moving here from California. When you have that kind of boom like that, so many people moving here, that's more people.
More stress.
Here is more power.
Yeah, more stress, more power.
Exactly. Right. So, and we don't have like the insulation on the homes that we need, so we're, you know, kind of losing a lot of power. So there are a lot of things that are going into this. I do have concerns about winter. I don't at this point feel it's anything like 2021. I hope that we don't see anything like 2021 again. And it would just have to be so many things contributing to put us in a 2021 situation. But it doesn't have to be that bad to be bad.
Right. No, situations can differ, and you know, sometimes it's not always the intensity. It's just, you know.
Yeah, right.
The fact that we're dealing with the scenario to begin with.
But I just say, and not to get on my high horse, my soapbox here, I just know living through 2021, how awful it was for so many people losing their lives, being uncomfortable. I mean, the stories, just thinking about it right now, I have like chills. And if me kicking up my thermostat a couple of degrees saves someone from going through that, I'm willing to do that for you. I'm willing to do that for you. I'm willing to do that for my neighbors. I'm willing to do that for you at home. So, I mean, like if you can conserve, then I would say let's do that for one another, because one of the things I love most about Houston is how people turn out for each other and help each other when it counts. So I would say don't think of it as helping out ERCOT. Let's think about it as helping out each other.
That's a great point. I mean, what would you say are kind of the main takeaways in terms of where we are now and the best way to kind of get information about where we're going moving forward in the days ahead?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because it's kind of like meteorology. It's all this like science and these weird words and bar
and it
charts
changes
and
so quickly, right?
It really does. Yeah. So I would say, follow us at Fox 26 Houston, because I share the information with the newsroom to get it out, and I always put the red alerts on my Twitter account and Facebook when I see something like, hey, pay attention right now, and we do the push alert. So if you have our Fox 26 mobile news app, that's how you can get it immediately. Like, oh my gosh, things just changed.
Yeah, you don't need the TV wherever you are, whether you're at work, if you're driving, obviously we don't want you to watch, but you can still listen to the information that's coming out through our app, our live stream, social media accounts, that we're jumping on right now to get you guys this information, in whatever way is convenient for you as quickly as possible, kind of keeping you in the loop. So I know you'll continue to monitor it, of course. And then we have our new Fox Local app, right? Which I think is a little confusing. People hear the word app, they think it's for their phone, and they're searching. They're like, wait, I can't find it. No, it's for your smart TV. Exactly. Yeah. You download it for your smart TV. You don't have to worry about a login and a password and a subscription and all these other things. You just download that. And the good thing about that, one of my most favorite features, is that you can go back and watch things that you missed.
Yes, right.
So,
and my favorite thing about it is that it's free. So, but with that, I'm not going to keep you any longer, especially because, it's past my nap time here, but just want to.
She came back, guys, to get you this information. That's how much she cares.
So I really do care. After 2021, I just don't want us to get us literally caught in the dark again, where we're like just in a panic situation and there's no way to get information because the electricity is gone. So I would also say with our Fox 26 app, the thing about it is that if you lose power, you can still get the information that you need, and information is tantamount when we're in a desperate situation. And again, I don't see desperation right now. I just want to kind of explain a little bit, because it's a lot of information. You're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at.
It's helpful, and it's confusing for people who don't understand it, but you really take the time to put it into digestible words that anyone who doesn't know anything about energy can still understand.
Thank you. That means a lot to me.
So we'll leave you with that, guys. If you have any questions, you can find both of us on social media. We'll be happy to answer, as much as humanly possible. And then, of course, we'll continue to keep you the latest. We're going to be back on air here in just a few hours. And in the meantime, all of those sources that we just let you know about is where you can find the most up-to-date information.